Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome back to Hoard of the Dragon Queen, episode 17, The Light of Hope. The party rode north to Eltural to meet up with Leosin and report on the status of the cult. On the second day, they noticed a light just above the horizon. Garrett, who was originally from the area, pointed to it as they were making camp that night. We're in Eltural now. That light hovers above the city of Eltural night and day to protect the city from undead. It also serves as a convenient guide to the capital city of this nation. The only problem is it can be hard to sleep at night if you don't have good shutters. He chuckled at the remark as the group took in what he told them. Everyone's thoughts focused on the city that night, and what they would say to Leosin when they got there. Well, they had been successful in stopping the hatching of 3 dragons and destroyed a base of the cult, as well as took out 2 of its leaders. The bulk of the cult in the area managed to escape unharmed, and the overall plan was neither stopped nor at least visibly slowed. No one thought they had dealt the cult a blow it couldn't recover from, and on top of that, they failed to find out how large the cult was or what its overall plans were. They were just grasping at straws, and that tended to be dangerous. Needless to say, with those less than happy thoughts in everyone's heads, they did not sleep well on the second night, which put a damper on the third day. Garrett only semi-helped matters by making sure that everyone knew that if Ontharr Frume was a key member of whatever this anti-cult organization that might be forming, it was key to impress him with their prowess, honesty, and drive. On the 4th day, they were forced to stop close to Eltural, but not quite there. The day was just not long enough, and their horses could not continue. Even though it would only be an hour or so ride the next day, it would have to wait until the next day. They spent the night at an inn that was on the road, and for a night they forgot the events of the last 10 days and enjoyed themselves. Good food and good drink were the orders of the night, and good company was had as well. They even ended that night in real beds that were more comfortable than anything they had slept in for months. They would start the last day of travel in high spirits and well rested before making their report. Eltural ended up being a large city that overlooked the river Ontharr. It impressed the party with how clean and orderly everything was. The buildings all seemed to be in good repair, and the streets were straight and cobbled and wide. Everywhere they looked, they saw merchants and river traders and farmers markets filling every square and in between every building. The streets bustled with craftsmen and laborers and people going about their business in a way that most cities didn't. Instead of each street being a raucous mob of people that pushed their way, there were 2 flows of pedestrian traffic, and between them, on most roads, were 2 flows of cart traffic. One could just enter the flow and walk along with the people until it was their turn to stop and exit, either to enter the flow of a side street or to enter their destination. Even the squares filled with merchants left a large area in the center free to allow traffic to flow in a circle to avoid any crashes or mishaps. The city guard was just frequent enough to be noticeable, but not too far away if needed, but not so frequent as to seem oppressive. Garrett, Tess, and Quora seemed to fit right into the city, as they were all from major cities. But the other 3 members of the group could not say the same. They were overawed at the bustle and the number of people and the height of such buildings. Luckily, Garrett had suggested they board their horses in a stable just outside of town and walk into the city, as it was clear after not too far into the city that Flintfinder, Mara, and Morn, none of them had enough wits about them to control their horses well through this city that they were so awestruck by. As soon as they started gaining their bearings, they began to look for people to ask if they had heard of Leosin, or even just a group of monks from either Greenest or Burdusk. It did not take them too long to come to the conclusion that this was not the right question to ask, as no one seemed to know anything about Leosin or his group. Naturally, it was Garrett who first asked about Ontharr Frume, and suddenly they were in business. Ontharr and his Order of the Gauntlet were well known to the people of Eltural, and in short order they were directed to a tavern named A Pair of Black Antlers. Once they had a destination, it was not hard to find it, and they were in the tavern by lunchtime and ate well in it. Just as they were finishing up, they noticed the familiar face of Nissim Waladra. The monk approached the table and smiled at him. "You're back, and given how short of a time it has been, much must have happened. Come, let's retire to a meeting room so you can give your report." He then led the party to a room in the back of the tavern. That was a well-appointed room with Leosin and a broad-shouldered giant of a man with a dwarf-like red beard and completely bald on top. He was in blue clothes with a silver gauntlet embroidered on his chest. Garrett smiled when he saw him. "Ontharr, good to see you." Nissim quietly stepped out while the party met Ontharr. Once introductions were over and the party was sitting, Leosin looked at them. "Okay. Apparently, something large has happened. I did not expect to see you here so soon. In fact, I had expected that I would have moved on by the time something worth reporting in about had happened, and I was preparing Ontharr to take a report." Flintfinder nodded seriously at Leosin's words. 2 days after you left, we went to the camp. Knowing where we were going and not having much to worry about guards or raiders who had lagged behind for most of it, we were able to make much better time than we had on the first trip there. We had spent a lot of time figuring out where we were going to camp, out to watch over the camp, and if it was something we should make multiple camps for or not. But it turned out to not be needed, as the camp was deserted when we got there. The entire kobold camp had been burned down. As far as we could tell, that was done in a second fire, and not the fire that Morn and Quora created to aid in our escape. And the upper camp was apparently packed away, except for a couple of tents. Near those tents were some apparent hunters, who paid us no mind as we snuck into the cave. We cleared out the kobolds from it, as well as killed Langdarosa Cyanrath and a leader named Frulam Mondath. We found and destroyed 3 dragon eggs that had been left in the cave, and most importantly, we found some papers telling us what the plans of the cult were. Everything is being moved to Nyantar, apparently by freight. It was clear on Leosin and Onthar's face that this was serious news. They each spent a short time considering what was said before Leosin finally looked back to the group. "You did well in everything you did. You more than earned the 150 gold each for this mission. Please feel free to stay here in the tavern as guests of the Order of the Gauntlet while Ontharr and I decide our next move. There's much to do, and activities aplenty." Leosin proved to be not wrong in that. There was plenty to do around the place, and it turned out almost everybody in the tavern was either a member of the Order of the Gauntlet or at least friendly with the group. And it was a rowdy group. The ale and mead never stopped flowing. Flintfinder and Tess won recognition, winning several bouts of arm wrestling. Since the tavern was located at the edge of town, there were horseback riding competitions, sparring, and weapon training. Every member of the group was able to relax and enjoy themselves as they participated in these events over the next several days, as they waited for Leosin and Ontharr to finish whatever plans they were making. At night, they retired together, and Garrett pointed out that Ontharr was clearly watching them all, and was clearly impressed, both by their skill and how well they fit in with the members of the Order. After several days had passed like this, Ontharr's squire led them to a common room, where they had given their report on the first evening. As soon as they entered the room, the squire closed the door behind them, not having entered herself. Inside the room were Leosin and Ontharr, as well as several pitchers of dark red wine. Instead of the usual open, jovial countenance that they had become used to on Ontharr, his face was as serious as he waited for them to pour their drinks and settle down into various chairs at the table. "My friends, we have important business to discuss. At this point, you know almost as much as we do, and thanks to you, we know twice as much today as we did a 10-day ago. Something rotten is clearly afoot. We have no formal organization to oppose these rascals. Not yet, anyway, but we are working on that." He paused here and made sure that the seriousness of his next words were felt by everybody in the party before continuing. "We need people like you, who know how and when to fight, and how and when to keep your heads down and observe. You have proven that you can do both from the raid and the rescue of our companion here," he said, gesturing to Leosin. "We can't promise you anything except long days filled with danger and stress. But what could be better than that, eh?" Thank you so much for listening to episode 17 of Hoard of the Dragon Queen. Make sure you tune in 2 weeks for episode 18, and make sure you tune in tomorrow for the next episode of the Monster Manual Backward, where we are going to cover horses.